Why was everyone laughing at her? The gym smelled faintly of old wood polish and sweat, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead as parents shifted restlessly on metal bleachers. It was demonstration day at Bayside Middle School, a Saturday afternoon meant to showcase children's progress in their martial arts program. Kids in crisp white uniforms lined the mats, voices rising in excited chatter, sneakers squeaking on the polished floor as more families filed in. Ren Harrove sat high on the bleachers, back straight, arms folded, trying to be invisible. She always tried. A weathered olive jacket draped across her shoulders, simple jeans, dark hair pulled back in a no-nonsense knot. She looked like any other parent. Ordinary. Bored, perhaps. But her stillness wasn't the kind of stillness that comes from disinterest. It was the kind that comes from calculation, from control. Beside her, a woman with an eager smile slid onto the bench. "You're Griffin's mom, right? I'm Azra, Lena's mother." Ren gave her a polite nod, the kind of smile that ended conversations before they began. She preferred it that way. Down on the mats, Griffin tugged nervously at his white belt. 12 years old, thin, serious. His eyes kept darting toward his mother and then away again, as if her gaze carried weight he wasn't ready to bear. Master Thorne entered with a theatrical bow, black uniform pressed, smile confident, the kind of man who filled a room without ever wondering if he belonged. Parents applauded. Cameras rose into the air, little glowing screens already hungry to capture moments. Thorne's voice boomed as he strutted across the mat. "Discipline, confidence, self-defense. These are what we give your children. These are what will carry them in life." The students shouted kiais in unison, sharp and loud, except Griffin's, which was quieter, hesitant. His movements were precise but lacked aggression, every strike followed by a quick glance at Ren. He searched her face for approval, for recognition. She gave him nothing but composure, though her eyes softened when their gazes met. Then came the invitation. "Do we have any parents with martial arts or military experience who'd be willing to help us with a demonstration?" Thorne asked, scanning the bleachers with a showman's grin. Before Ren could shift lower in her seat, Azra's hand shot up. "She was military," Azra declared, pointing directly at Ren. Griffin's face drained of color. His shoulders sank as whispers rippled across the mats. "That's Griffin's mom. My dad says she just did paperwork in the military." Thorne's smile widened, predator-sure. "Perfect. Would you mind helping with our demonstration? It'll be simple." Ren's lips pressed into a thin line. "I'd rather not." The instructor's grin never faltered, but his voice took on the hard edge of challenge. "Just a demonstration. Nothing dangerous. It's important the children see how anyone can defend themselves with proper technique." Griffin stared at the floor. Parents craned their necks. Phones tilted higher. A woman in jeans, ordinary as dishwater, was being pushed into the spotlight. Ren hesitated. Then she caught Griffin's eyes. Embarrassment, shame, fear. He wanted to disappear. Something flickered inside her. She stood. Her steps toward the mat were quiet, efficient. No wasted motion. She carried herself not like someone approaching humiliation, but like someone answering a call. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Thorne beamed at the crowd. "We'll use a practice knife. Don't worry, I'll be gentle." His tone dripped with condescension. Ren stood with her hands at her sides, eyes neutral. Her jacket shifted slightly, revealing a flash of a tag, military issue, though most wouldn't notice. Her stance was casual, yet her weight balanced evenly, ready to pivot. She scanned the exits, the crowd, the obstacles in the room, an old reflex she didn't consciously suppress. The knife came fast, faster than anyone expected. Thorne lunged, rubber blade thrust forward with more force than a gentle demonstration required. Parents leaned in, some already chuckling in anticipation of the stumble, the awkward retreat. It never came. In a blur of motion almost too fast to follow, Ren's hand intercepted his wrist. A twist, precise, surgical, no wasted energy. The knife clattered across the mat, sliding to a stop near Griffin's feet. Thorne's body slammed down a moment later, face first, arm twisted behind his back, completely immobilized. The silence was suffocating. Phones froze midair, parents gaped, children's mouths hung open. Wren's expression remained unchanged, calm, detached, as if she'd done nothing more strenuous than flick a light switch. She released him and stepped back, straightening her jacket with quiet dignity. The man on the floor blinked in shock, his persona shattered. He rubbed his wrist, humiliation burning across his face. From the back of the gym, an older man rose slowly to his feet. Retired military, his posture unmistakable. He stared at Wren as if seeing a ghost. Then, with solemn precision, he raised his hand in salute. Wren's eyes met his, a flicker of recognition. She returned the salute with flawless form. Gasps rippled through the gym. Whispers spread like wildfire. Who is she? What just happened? Why did that officer salute her? Griffin stared at his mother with wide eyes, awe and confusion mingling in his expression. The quiet, ordinary woman he thought he knew had just dismantled the entire reality of who she was. The officer's voice carried across the silent gym. Lieutenant Commander Hargrove, Valor Team Alpha, Basra, 2013. The color drained from Thorne's face. He stumbled back, his arrogance extinguished. Commander, I had no idea. Children sat frozen. Parents clutched their phones without daring to record further. The world had shifted in the space of a heartbeat. Wren said nothing. She didn't need to. Griffin's small voice broke the silence. Mom, it was more plea than question. The officer stepped forward, his salute still fresh in the air. You just attempted to demonstrate combat techniques to one of the most decorated special operators in naval history, he said to Thorne, his voice laced with disbelief. Lieutenant Commander Wren Hargrove led missions that saved lives across 3 continents. Whispers turned to stares, stares into something heavier, reverence, even fear. Thorne bowed his head, genuine now. Forgive me, Commander, I meant no disrespect. He hesitated, then added, would you demonstrate something real? Wren looked at Griffin, who stared back at her as though seeing her for the first time. His earlier embarrassment had melted into something new, pride. She gave a single nod. Thorne attacked again, this time without theater, without games. Wren's movements were stripped of flourish, a masterclass in efficiency. She explained nothing until the motion was complete, then broke it down calmly, each detail delivered with clarity. Strength wasn't the point. Speed wasn't the point. Timing, technique, control. Her voice carried differently than Thorne. Where his had demanded attention, hers commanded it without effort. Even the children felt it, their chatter silenced by something deeper than instruction. When she finished, the room erupted, not in applause but in stunned silence followed by reverence. Thorne bowed low, the students following suit. Wren said nothing. She simply stepped off the mat. In the parking lot afterward, Griffin trailed beside her, questions burning. At last they stopped by their car. Why didn't you ever tell me? He asked, voice small, eyes wide. Wren's answer was quiet. Because I wanted you to know me as Mom first, not for what I used to do. He stared at her, struggling to fit the 2 halves of her into one whole. But you're a hero. She placed her hands on his shoulders, eyes steady. The real heroes are the ones who didn't come home. Her voice carried no pride, no self-congratulation, just truth. That night, videos of the demonstration spread like wildfire. By Monday morning, whispers followed Griffin down every hallway. That's him. That's the one who's Mom. Wren said nothing. She went back to her routine, filing papers, cooking meals, folding laundry, her jacket hanging quietly by the door. But the whispers would not die. And somewhere beyond Bayside, those whispers stirred memories better left buried. Why was everyone staring at him? By Monday morning, Griffin Hargrove felt every step through the school hallways like a spotlight pressed against his back. Conversation stopped when he passed. Eyes lingered too long. Whispers chased him from locker to classroom. That's him, his mom's the one. My dad showed me the video. She flipped him like nothing. Somebody said she was like a spy or something. Griffin hunched his shoulders, kept his head down. For years he'd been invisible, quiet, unremarkable. And now, overnight, his entire identity had changed, not because of who he was, but because of her. At lunch, Darius Reeves, the captain of the wrestling team who had barely spoken to him before, dropped his tray across from Griffin's. "So," he leaned in, lowering his voice, "is it true? Your mom's like Navy SEAL, female James Bond, all that." Griffin stabbed at his food, shrugging. "She was in the Navy, special stuff, that's all I know." Darius whistled softly. "But women aren't even allowed in SEALs." "Maybe not officially," Griffin said. His own words surprised him. He didn't sound proud. He sounded defensive, protective. But apparently there are things nobody talks about. Darius grinned, but Griffin couldn't share the smile, because the truth wasn't pride. The truth was something heavier: confusion, betrayal. His whole life his mother had been just mom, the one who forced him to do homework before video games, the one who checked the doors 3 times every night, the one who made him eat vegetables. And now, suddenly, she was someone else too, someone bigger, someone dangerous. He couldn't stop thinking about that moment in the gym, the way she'd moved, how calm she'd looked, the salute from that officer, Colonel Merrick, she'd called him later. None of it fit with the woman who folded his laundry and clipped coupons from the paper. That night at home, he found her at the kitchen table, laptop open, papers scattered, the boring, ordinary mask firmly in place. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" he asked, the words spilling out before he could stop them. Wren closed her laptop slowly, met his eyes. "Sit down." "No, I don't want to sit. I want answers." Her sigh was soft, tired. She leaned back in her chair. "What exactly do you want to know?" "Everything. Were you really a SEAL?" "Not exactly," she said carefully. "Women weren't officially allowed in SEAL teams during my time. I was part of a parallel program, adjacent units, Valor Team Alpha. We operated where the lines blurred." "What did you do?" "Hostage extractions, close quarters combat, intelligence gathering." His throat tightened. "Combat like real fighting, killing." Wren's eyes darkened, her voice quiet. "That's not something I discuss, Griffin, not with you. Some memories belong in the past." He sank into the chair anyway, head spinning. "So all this time, you were lying to me." "Not lying," Wren said. Her tone softened. "Protecting. I wanted you to grow up with a normal mother, not a soldier, not a ghost from classified missions." Griffin shook his head. "Normal? We moved 3 times before I was 10. You lock the closet cabinet like it's Fort Knox. You sit facing the door in restaurants. That's not normal." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Old habits, security protocols. You notice more than I thought." He swallowed, anger and awe tangled inside him. "What's in the cabinet?" "Documents, keepsakes, a few tools, legal weapons," she added quickly. "Secured." His head spun. His mom had weapons locked in her closet. His mom had killed, maybe. His mom had been living 2 lives. The doorbell rang. Wren's body changed instantly. Shoulders squared, chin lifted, eyes narrowing with that predatory awareness he'd only glimpsed on the mat. She moved to the window at an angle, careful, invisible from outside. Her voice was steady when she said, "It's Colonel Merrick." The man from the gym stood on their porch, civilian clothes, doing nothing to soften the iron of his posture. "Commander," he greeted when Wren opened the door. "Forgive the intrusion, but we need to talk." Griffin watched his mother transform, standing taller, her voice clipped, formal. "Colonel, unexpected." "May I come in?" Inside, Merrick's eyes flicked to Griffin. "Your mother," he said, "is one of the finest soldiers I've ever known." Griffin's stomach twisted. "Then why'd she hide it from me?" Because sometimes survival means silence, Merrick said. Wren cut him a sharp look. Colonel. Merrick ignored it. Your cover is blown, Commander. That video from Saturday is everywhere. Over 1 million views already. With today's recognition tech, it's only a matter of time before certain interested parties put together that Wren Harrove, quiet accountant in Bayside, is Lieutenant Commander Wren Hargrove, Valor Team Alpha. Griffin froze. Interested parties. Merrick nodded gravely. Your mother made powerful enemies. A chill ran through him. He looked at her. We're in danger, aren't we? Her silence was answer enough. Merrick slid a card onto the table. Blackwood thinks it's time to consider sanctuary protocol. Wren's face went pale. What's that? Griffin asked. Relocation, Wren said tightly. New names, new lives, cut ties completely. No, Griffin blurted. My school, my friends, I can't just disappear. You might not have a choice, Merrick warned. We're not being dramatic, son. Karachi, you remember, Commander. You lived because you chose caution. The silence that followed was suffocating. Griffin turned to his mother. What happened in Karachi? Her eyes flickered with pain. Another time. But Griffin saw it. The shadow of loss behind her calm exterior. The ghost she carried. Merrick stood. You have until tomorrow to decide. Sanctuary is ready if you want it. When he left, Griffin felt the room collapse into silence. Mom, his voice cracked. Are we in real danger? She sat beside him, hands clasped. There's always risk, Griffin, but nothing has changed since Saturday except awareness. We'll take precautions as we always have. He wanted to believe her, but that night he dreamed of shadows moving through their house, faceless men who knew his name. And before dawn, his mother's phone rang. She answered on the second ring, her voice hard, awake. Hargrove. A voice he didn't know on the other end. We have movement. Facial recognition hit in Portland. Dave Corba cleared customs. Wren's face turned to stone. Griffin sat up in bed, listening through the thin walls, not understanding but knowing enough. Something had shifted. Something dangerous. By morning, their lives would never be the same. Why was she waking him up in the middle of the night? Griffin rubbed his eyes, disoriented, as his mother's hand pressed gently against his shoulder. The room was dark except for the faint glow of the streetlight seeping through the curtains. Her voice was calm, too calm. Pack a small bag, essentials only, we're leaving. He blinked at her half asleep. What, why, where? 15 minutes, Griffin. Her tone left no space for argument. Downstairs. Something in her eyes, the intensity, the readiness, banished the fog of sleep. Griffin swung out of bed and pulled his backpack from the corner. He grabbed clothes, his toothbrush, the watch his grandfather had given him, his phone. Every movement felt surreal, like he was walking through someone else's nightmare. When he came downstairs, Wren was already by the door, car keys in hand, a nondescript duffel slung over her shoulder. She didn't look like Mom anymore. She looked like someone else, someone prepared for whatever waited beyond the porch. The night was silent as they drove east, the suburban streets thinning into empty highways. Griffin stared out the window, watching the only home he'd known fade into the darkness behind them. Where are we going? He finally asked. Safe house, 2 hours from here, off-grid, secure. For how long? Until I can assess the situation. Her voice was steady, but he heard the tension beneath it. He sat in silence for a long time, listening to the hum of the tires. Finally, he said, It's because of what that colonel said, isn't it? Because of the sanctuary thing. Wren kept her eyes on the road. This is precautionary. Precautionary means danger, doesn't it? She didn't answer, not directly, but her hands gripped the wheel tighter. The miles stretched, streetlights disappeared. The world outside the window turned into a blur of trees and shadow. You've always been ready for this, Griffin said suddenly. That's why we moved so much. Why you checked the locks every night. Why you made me memorize those weird phone numbers. Ren glanced at him, then back at the road. Contingency planning, better to have and not need. Did you ever think about telling me the truth before all this? When you turned 18, I planned to give you the choice to know or not. His chest tightened. So you thought I couldn't handle it? No, she shook her head. I knew you could. I just wanted you to have what I never did, a normal childhood. The car was quiet for a moment. Then Griffin asked, was your childhood bad? Her jaw tightened. Not bad, just military. My father served. We moved constantly. By 15, I could field strip a rifle and speak 4 languages, but I'd never been to a school dance. Never kept a friend longer than 6 months. Griffin sat with that, imagining the weight of it. His mother as a teenager, already a soldier in everything but name. Is that why you let me do karate, instead of teaching me yourself? Ren smiled faintly. Partly. Also because sometimes parents can't be teachers. It complicates things. I thought you'd enjoy learning from someone else. Griffin snorted. Like Master Thorn, yeah, that worked out great. Ren's smile flickered. He's not bad for beginners. They drove in silence for a while, the tension stretching taut again. Then Griffin asked the question that had been burning in his chest since the colonel's visit. What happens if these people find us? Ren's eyes stayed on the road. They won't. But if they do, then we adapt. Do we run forever, change names, disappear? Her voice was quiet but hard. If it comes to that, yes. The thought hollowed him out. His school, his friends, his life, all gone, replaced with shadows and new names. It's not fair, he whispered. No, she said softly, it is. They didn't speak again until the safe house appeared. A cabin in the woods, tucked into pines, hidden off a winding dirt road. To Griffin, it looked ordinary, maybe even comforting. But when his mother parked, her voice turned firm. Stay in the car. She opened the glove compartment, pulled something out, and stepped into the night. Griffin's stomach dropped when he saw the gleam of a handgun in her hand. You have a gun. Stay in the car. Her movements outside were unlike anything he'd ever seen in real life. Not flashy, not theatrical, just precise. She moved like a shadow with purpose, weapon low but ready, scanning every angle, every corner. In 5 minutes she was back, signaling him forward. The cabin was sparse inside, 2 small bedrooms, a wood stove, simple furniture, no pictures on the walls, nothing that said home. Ren set her duffel down. For now, this is home. Griffin dropped his backpack with a hollow thud. What happens next? You get some sleep. I need to make calls. Sleep with all this. Rest while you can, she said gently. That's the first rule in uncertain situations. He wanted to argue, but exhaustion dragged at him. His body ached from adrenaline. He went to one of the bedrooms, leaving the door cracked so he could still hear her voice. Ren sat by the window, phone in hand, waiting until his breathing steadied. Then she dialed. Merrick, she said when the colonel answered. We're secure at Outpost Echo. What's the latest on Corba's movement? Merrick's voice was grim. Rented an SUV in Portland, last trace near Salem. Associates identified Volkov and Risnik, former Serbian special forces, private contractors now, expensive, dangerous. Ren closed her eyes, exhaling slowly. They're coming in force. That's our assessment. Blackwood insists sanctuary is still your safest option. Clean extraction, new identities, within the hour if you give the word. Her gaze shifted to Griffin's door. He was asleep, breathing steady, innocent even now. She whispered, and if I do? Then you're choosing to engage rather than evade. But understand this, Commander, no official support. Not for an offensive, not without authorization. Ren's voice was steady. I understand. She ended the call and sat in the dark, staring at the tree line. The smart choice was sanctuary. New identities, new city, disappear again. He'd be safe. But how many times could she uproot him before it broke something inside him that couldn't be fixed? The alternative was to fight, to become again what she had tried so hard to bury, to be the operative, not the mother. Her hand lifted unconsciously, touching the scar at her temple. A memory flickered, the last time she'd faced Korba's network. Karachi, her team gone, only her left standing, and then discovering she was pregnant with Griffin. That had been the end of her old life. Now it threatened to be the beginning of it again. By morning, she had made her decision. Griffin was already awake when she stepped onto the porch. He sat with his knees drawn up, watching the sunrise through the trees. "You didn't sleep," she said quietly. "Neither did you." They sat in silence for a long time, the forest alive with birdsong, the air sharp with pine. Finally, Griffin asked, "So, are we running or fighting?" Wren looked at him, really looked. "What makes you think those are the only choices?" "Because I'm not stupid. Either we disappear or you stop them." His voice was steady, older somehow. "Those are the choices, right?" She studied him, saw the boy, saw the man he was becoming. "Yes, those are the choices." He held her gaze. "So which is it?" She took a breath. "Both. You're going to sanctuary with Merrick, and I'll deal with this." His eyes widened. "You're sending me away." Temporarily. She reached for his hand, rare now that he was older. "I need to know you're safe. It's the only way I can focus." "It's not fair," he said again. "Sometimes the tactically correct decision doesn't feel fair," she said softly. "Trust me." "For how long?" "A few days at most." "Promise you'll come get me." His voice cracked. "Promise we won't just disappear forever." Wren's hand tightened around his. "I promise. One way or another this ends now. No more running, no more hiding who we are." His eyes glistened. "Be careful, Mom. I just found out who you really are. I don't want to lose you now." Her throat tightened, but her voice stayed steady. "You won't lose me." 2 hours later, Merrick arrived in an unmarked SUV. The goodbye was brief. No dramatics, just trust and quiet fear. Wren watched the vehicle disappear down the dirt road, carrying away the only part of her life that mattered more than survival. Then she turned back to the cabin, to her weapons, to her plan. 12 years she had buried the operative. 12 years she had been just a mother. Now she would have to be both. That night when Korba's men crossed into the woods, they thought they were hunting a ghost. Instead, they found Lieutenant Commander Wren Hargrove, alive, waiting, and with nothing left to hide. Why did the forest sound wrong tonight? Wren stood by the window, the cabin dark, her breath steady though her pulse betrayed her. The forest should have been alive with insects, with rustling night creatures, with owls. Instead, silence had settled over the trees, heavy and deliberate, the kind of silence that spoke of predators. She checked her watch. Griffin would be halfway to sanctuary by now. Merrick wouldn't fail her in that, but distance did not erase fear. She promised her son he wouldn't lose her. Now she had to make that true. Wren moved through the cabin with fluid efficiency. Every curtain closed, every entry reinforced. Her handgun lay on the table next to a folded map, a satellite phone, and a knife that had been with her since Yemen. The scar on her temple throbbed with memory, Karachi, a rooftop lit by muzzle flashes, voices in her ear that had gone silent one by one until she was alone. She shoved the thought away. Focus. She had set the cabin long ago, prepared it in case the past ever caught up. Traps in the tree line, alternate exits, concealed caches of gear. 12 years of pretending to be ordinary had never dulled her instincts. Tonight, she would need them all. Through the glass she caught movement, small, purposeful, not wildlife. A man, tall, deliberate steps, another figure flanking wide. Wren's stomach sank. They arrived sooner than expected. Her pulse slowed, not racing, controlled. She slipped the safety off her weapon, checked the chamber, exhaled once. You're not just a mother tonight. You're the operator for him, for Griffin." The first sound came low, a twig snap, deliberate but quiet, meant to test the silence. Then another. They were probing, circling. She could almost hear Corba's voice in her head, smug and patient. He hadn't forgotten Yemen. He hadn't forgotten her. The floorboard under her foot creaked and Wren froze, every muscle locked. She waited. Outside, the men paused. One whispered something in Serbian. Volkov, maybe. She filed it away. Wren's hand brushed the edge of the table where Griffin's backpack had rested earlier. She pictured his wide eyes, the way he'd said, "Don't let me lose you now." That memory steadied her more than training ever could. The first shadow moved closer, shape stretching across the clearing. Wren didn't wait for him to test the door. She slipped to the side, knees bent, pistol angled. Timing was everything. The cabin door handle jiggled softly, then harder. A pause, then a faint scrape as tools worked at the lock. Wren moved silently to the alternate exit, her body remembering steps she hadn't taken in years. She eased the back door open just enough to slip into the night, the cold air wrapping her like a second skin. The forest greeted her not as an enemy but as cover. The men thought they were hunting. They didn't realize the ground itself had been shaped by her hands, years ago, in preparation. The first trap snapped with a sharp metallic twang and a muffled curse followed. Someone had hit the tripwire. She didn't smile. There was nothing satisfying about what was to come, only necessity. Wren slipped behind a tree, sighting her pistol low. A figure stumbled into the faint moonlight, weapon raised. She squeezed the trigger once, controlled, precise. The man dropped soundlessly. Not dead, she hadn't aimed to kill. Not yet, but he would be out of the fight. The silence deepened. They knew now she wasn't running. A voice carried softly through the trees, accented, mocking. "Hargrove." Her stomach tightened. Corba. His voice hadn't aged a day. "Come out," he called. "You and I, we have unfinished business." She pressed her back against the bark, every nerve alive. For 12 years she had prayed this moment would never come, but fate never forgot. "I know you're here," Corba said. "Your son will pay for what you stole from me, unless you surrender." The words slid like ice into her chest. Griffin. Even safe, even gone, he was Corba's leverage. She forced her voice steady, projecting just enough to carry. "You don't get him, you never will." Her words hung in the night, swallowed by the trees. The forest erupted. 2 figures moved fast, flanking hard, their training sharp. These weren't amateurs, Volkov and Risnik. Her muscles moved before thought caught up. She dropped to a crouch, fired twice, heard a grunt, a body hit dirt. The other pressed forward, relentless. She pivoted, knife flashing, a silent arc through the darkness. Flesh yielded, a strangled sound, then quiet again. Her breath came heavy now. She hadn't fought like this in years. The ghosts pressed close, Karachi, Basra, Yemen. Her team falling one by one, the blood on her hands. But this wasn't about ghosts. This was about Griffin. The forest stilled again. She knew Corba was still out there, waiting. "Impressive," his voice taunted. "Still sharp, Commander, but you can't stop the tide forever. You will tire. And when you do, I'll take everything you care about." Her hand tightened on her weapon. "The difference between us, Corba, is that I don't break." The night drew in closer, every shadow a threat, every breath a countdown. She thought of Griffin's small hand in hers that morning. "Promise me you'll come back." Her chest tightened, but her resolve turned to steel. She had run from her past long enough. Tonight she would finish it. The forest held its breath. And Wren moved first. Why did his voice sound so close, even when she couldn't see him? Wren pressed her back against the rough bark, her pulse steady, weapon low but ready. The forest was quiet again, except for the echo of Corba's taunt drifting through the trees. He had always known how to cut deeper with words than with bullets. Tonight, he was trying both. She crouched lower, her eyes flicking over the moonlit clearing, scanning for movement. She caught the faintest rustle, left, not right. Instinct screamed before thought did. She rolled, raised, fired once. A shadow crumpled, not Corba, but another of his hired men, sliding lifeless into the needles. Her breath fogged the night air. She should feel something, guilt, adrenaline, pride, but there was only focus. Griffin's face hovered in her mind, steadying her more than training manuals ever had. "Do you remember Karachi?" Corba's voice carried again, closer now, smooth, mocking. "I do. I remember the look in your eyes when you realized you were the last one standing. All your brave team gone, and you, crawling through the blood and dust, still fighting, always fighting. Tell me, Commander, how many nights do you wake in sweat hearing them scream?" Her grip tightened on the pistol. He wasn't wrong. The nightmares had never left. She had locked them behind walls, buried them beneath motherhood, paperwork, normalcy. But the walls cracked now under his words. She forced a steady inhale, then exhale. "You're talking too much, Corba," she called back softly. "That's what men do when they're afraid." A pause, just long enough to tell her the insult had landed. Then laughter, low and chilling. "Still sharp, but you forget I've studied you. Patience is my weapon, and I've waited 12 years for this." Ren slipped along the tree line, quiet as breath. The cabin loomed behind her, its shadow against the moonlight, the place where she'd once believed she could hide forever. That illusion was gone. Her foot brushed a root. She stilled, every nerve taut. The forest seemed to lean in, listening. She thought again of Griffin, asleep hours away, safe for now. His voice echoed in her head, "Be careful, Mom. I just found out who you really are." She couldn't let that discovery be his last memory of her. A sharp crack split the silence, a gunshot from behind. Bark splintered near her cheek. She dropped flat, dirt in her mouth, rolled, sighted, fired back twice. Silence swallowed the shots. Then a low groan and another body stilled. 2 down, maybe 3, but Corba was still moving, always moving. She dragged herself behind a fallen log, forcing her breaths quiet, shallow. Sweat stung her scar, memory bleeding in with the night. Karachi again, smoke thick in her lungs, teammates falling one by one. The last time she'd heard Corba's voice, it had been across a battlefield just like this. And she had promised herself he would never have the chance again. But promises made in blood are harder to keep. "You lost everything that night," he called now, his voice shifting position, weaving through the trees like smoke. "And then you disappeared, a ghost. I asked myself, where could a woman like you vanish? Answer was simple, you became no one, just another face in the crowd, just another mother blending in. Until now. Until that little boy forced you back into the light." Ren's stomach twisted. He was baiting her, digging at the weakest place, Griffin. "You stay away from him," she hissed, her voice cutting sharp through the night. A low chuckle floated back. "But why would I? You've hidden him so carefully, which means he matters, which means he's the perfect target." Rage surged through her, hot and dangerous. She wanted to break cover, to put a bullet between his eyes now, but rage was his trap, always had been. She closed her eyes, forced herself back into control. Her mind slipped instead to Griffin's birth, the hospital lights, the sound of his cry, thin and new. She had been broken then, broken and rebuilt all at once. A woman who had been carved by war suddenly held a life too fragile for war's weight. That was when she decided. No more missions, no more blood, just him, just motherhood. And yet here she was, gun in hand, ghost circling again. Corba's voice broke her reverie. "I saw the video, you know, the little display in the school gym, very impressive. You must have forgotten that these days nothing stays buried. You've gone viral, Commander." Ren's jaw clenched. That cursed video. What had seemed like a humiliation, a silly demonstration gone wrong, had torn open her entire cover. And the world had taken notice. Not just strangers on the internet, but men like Corba who waited like vultures for weakness. She shifted position again, silent, careful. Her ears picked up faint movement, brush disturbed 30 meters ahead. A trap she had laid days ago caught, the faint metallic snap echoing. Then silence again. She raised her weapon, waited. The shadow appeared, barely visible against the darker night. She held her breath, finger on the trigger. But the voice came from behind her, close, too close. "You're slipping, Commander." Her stomach dropped as the realization hit. He had maneuvered her, forced her into reacting, into watching the wrong direction. She pivoted fast, just in time. A flash of muzzle fire tore through the night. The bullet whistled past her shoulder, embedding in the tree. She dropped, rolled, fired blind. No hit, just darkness swallowing everything again. Her pulse raced now, though she forced it slower. She had to. She couldn't afford panic. Corba's laughter, low and taunting, slid between the trees. "Not as sharp as before. You've gone soft. Motherhood does that, makes you weak." Wren pressed her forehead against the damp earth, whispering to herself, "He's wrong. He's wrong. He doesn't know." Because Griffin wasn't weakness. He was the reason she'd survived this long. The reason she would finish this. She rose again, slowly, eyes scanning, body low. The forest stretched wide, but it felt like a cage. Corba had the numbers, the patience, the grudge. But she had something he would never understand, something that wasn't in any manual or mission briefing. She had love. And love, when threatened, was the most dangerous weapon of all. She edged back toward the cabin, each step deliberate, every sense stretched thin. The safe house wasn't a fortress, but it was hers. She knew every board, every creak, every inch. Inside, she could control the ground better than out here. But stepping back meant risk. Retreat always did. Another gunshot cracked, close. Splinters flew from the doorframe as she slid inside, crouching low. She slammed the door shut, dragged the heavy bar into place. The cabin plunged into deeper silence, the air heavy with anticipation. Wren moved quickly now, setting defenses inside. Furniture pushed to choke entryways, lights off, every shadow an ally. She pressed her back against the wall, gun ready, listening. Outside, the forest shifted with movement. They were regrouping, positioning, waiting for the order. And Corba's voice came one last time, softer now, almost intimate. "You can't win this alone, Wren. Sooner or later you'll fall, and when you do, I'll be there, watching the light leave your eyes." Her hands shook, just barely, but she tightened her grip. Her whisper was steady, certain. "You've underestimated me before, Corba. That's why I'm still alive. That's why you're still chasing me." The cabin creaked around her, every sound amplified. She steadied her breath, closed her eyes for one beat, then opened them again. The ghosts of Karachi pressed close, but she pushed them back. This wasn't the past. This was now. And she wasn't running anymore. Not for him, not for anyone. Why did the walls feel like they were closing in? Wren crouched low inside the cabin, her weapon ready, her breath slow but deliberate. The silence outside was unbearable. She knew it wasn't safety, it was the prelude, the pause before the storm. Her hands brushed over the rough wood floor. This place had been her illusion of normal, gardening out front, quiet evenings balancing small-town business ledgers, Griffin asleep in the next room, all of it built on sand, waiting for the tide. Now the tide was here. The first window shattered. Glass sprayed across the floor. She moved instantly, rolling away from the sound, firing twice toward the shape in the frame. A grunt, a body slumping against the siding, but more followed, boots crunching against pine needles outside, the scrape of metal against wood. She darted to the other side of the cabin, heart pounding steady, not racing. She had trained her body for this rhythm, every breath measured, every movement controlled. A flashbang clattered through the broken glass, bouncing across the floorboards. Her eyes narrowed. Old instincts flared. She dove behind the overturned table, turning her face, covering her ears just as it detonated. The world cracked with light and sound, a hollow roar inside her skull. She fought through it, pushed herself upright, weapon raised. Two shadows spilled through the doorframe, low and fast, trained. She fired once, dropped to her knees, fired again. One man collapsed. The second lunged forward, swinging the butt of his rifle. It cracked against her forearm, pain shooting white-hot, but she pivoted, twisting his momentum. A knife flashed in her other hand, steel buried into his side. He fell hard, breath gurgling. Her chest heaved now, the sting of sweat in her eyes. She staggered back, steadying herself against the wall. The cabin smelled of gunpowder, blood, and splintered wood. Then silence again. Too much silence. She pressed herself flat, listening. She heard it then, soft creaks above her. Roof. They were coming in from the top. Wren moved fast, shoving the stove pipe until it rattled loose. Ash rained down, clouding the air. She grabbed a chair, hurled it at the ceiling just as the first boot punched through the shingles. The intruder dropped halfway into the room, off balance. She fired once. He went limp, falling into the chaos below. Another tried to follow. She yanked the stove's iron poker from its cradle and swung upward with brutal force, catching his wrist. A howl of pain tore through the night, and he retreated into the shadows above. She stood in the smoke in silence, chest rising and falling, every muscle burning. And then she heard him. Still fighting like Karachi, Corba's voice drawled from outside, closer now, confident, patient. But you're only one woman, Wren. One woman against time, against memory, against me. Her jaw tightened. His voice cut deep because Karachi had never left her. She could still see it, the marketplace, the chaos, the sudden eruption of fire and lead. Her team, Valor Team Alpha, fighting until the air was thick with dust and screams. She'd been the only one to walk out alive. She carried that weight for years, burying it beneath motherhood. And now he was dragging it out, forcing her to bleed twice for the same wound. "Where's your boy?" Corba taunted. "Did you send him away, or is he hiding in the dark like you, listening to every scream?" Her stomach twisted. His words weren't random. He was probing, trying to find cracks, trying to force her into mistakes. She exhaled once, then whispered into the silence, steady and cold, "You'll never touch him, not while I breathe." She moved to the back room, quickly checking her fallback gear. Extra magazines, knife, emergency med kit. Her forearm throbbed where the rifle had struck, but it wasn't broken. She flexed it once, tested her grip. Pain, but manageable. The cabin groaned around her. She felt the weight of them pressing closer, circling. A new sound cut through the night, a low hiss, gas. She smelled it instantly, tear gas. Her throat burned as the canister rolled across the floor, spewing white clouds. She coughed once, forced her lungs steady, yanked her jacket over her nose. But her eyes stung, vision swimming. She dropped to her knees, crawling toward the emergency crate. She ripped it open, hands shaking but sure, pulling out an old gas mask. She strapped it on, the world sharpening again through fogged lenses. Shadows burst through the doorway, rifles raised. She dropped flat, fired from the ground, one shot then another. A body fell across the threshold, blocking the others. She rolled, knife in hand, slashing low at a boot that crossed the threshold. A cry, then another body hitting the wood. They kept coming. Her arms trembled now, every muscle screaming, lungs burning even through the mask. She couldn't stop. She wouldn't stop. She ducked behind the kitchen counter, reloading with practiced speed, when a voice whispered right behind her ear. "Miss me." Her blood froze. She spun, but too late. Corba's hand caught her wrist, twisting, forcing the gun against the wood. Pain shot up her arm. His other hand shoved against her throat, pressing her against the counter. His face was inches from hers, older, scarred, but the same eyes she remembered. Cold, smug, the eyes of the man who had haunted her for 12 years. "You should have killed me in Karachi," he hissed. "Now your son will pay the price." Her vision blurred, not from lack of air, but from rage. Her free hand shot up, slamming the heel of her palm into his jaw. His grip loosened just enough. She twisted, breaking free, shoving him back against the wall. He swung, fist grazing her temple. The scar burned under the strike. They crashed into the table, splintering it, wood exploding under their weight. She grabbed the knife from her belt, slashing upward, but he caught her wrist again, the blade hovering inches from his throat. Still strong, he snarled, spittle flying, but not strong enough. Her arms shook, the knife trembling between them, muscles screaming. His weight pressed down harder, her breath caught. She could hear her heartbeat, loud as gunfire. Then through the haze, Griffin's face flashed in her mind, his small voice, "Promise me you'll come back." A surge of strength tore through her, not from training, not from rage, from love. She shoved upward with everything she had left. The blade sank into Corba's shoulder, blood spraying hot across her hand. He roared, stumbling back, crashing into the wall. She ripped the knife free, panting, chest heaving. He staggered, clutching the wound, glaring at her with hatred so pure it almost burned. "This isn't over," he rasped, backing toward the shattered door. His men scrambled, dragging him out, covering retreat with gunfire. Bullets ripped through the walls, splintering wood, but she stayed low, pressing her back against the counter, weapon raised. Then silence again. The forest swallowed them. Her arms trembled, knife slick with blood, lungs dragging in ragged breaths through the mask. She stayed crouched for long minutes, waiting, listening, every nerve raw. Only when the silence settled thick and heavy again did she finally lower the blade. Her body shook, adrenaline draining away, leaving only exhaustion. She pulled the mask off, collapsing against the broken wall, staring into the night beyond. They would be back, she knew that. Corba would never stop, not until one of them was gone. She closed her eyes. Griffin's face filled her again. And she whispered into the darkness, voice hoarse but unbroken. "I promised him I'd come back, and I will, even if it kills me." Why wouldn't her hand stop shaking? Wren pressed a strip of torn fabric against her forearm, blood seeping between her fingers. The cabin smelled of smoke and iron, the air heavy with dust and ash. Every breath tasted of gunpowder. She leaned against the cracked wall, trying to slow her pulse, trying to anchor herself in silence. The fight had lasted minutes, maybe less, but her body felt like it had carried another war. She forced her breath slow, counting the beats. 1, 2, 3, control it, control yourself. Her eyes scanned the cabin, shattered furniture, bullet holes through the wood, blood pooling dark near the doorframe where two bodies lay motionless, and her knife, still slick, resting on the floor where she had dropped it after Corba retreated. He hadn't died, she hadn't finished it. Her jaw clenched. That failure would cost her more blood later, she knew it. She wrapped the wound tightly, knotting the fabric until the bleeding slowed. Pain radiated up her arm, sharp and hot. She flexed her fingers, once weak but functional. She could still fight. She had to. For Griffin, always for Griffin. She closed her eyes and saw him again, the way his face looked when he said, "Promise me you'll come back." It had been more than a plea. It had been a demand, and she had given him her word. She couldn't break it. The silence pressed in too heavy. She forced herself to move, sweeping through the cabin again, checking angles, checking bodies. One man groaned faintly, still alive but too wounded to rise. She stared at him for a long moment, her pistol in hand, her finger trembling on the trigger. It would be easier to end it here. No risk, no unfinished business. But she lowered the weapon. She wasn't him, she was Corba. "Tell him," she whispered, her voice cracked, hoarse. "Tell him I'm not running anymore." The man's eyes widened, but she turned away, leaving him bleeding on the floor. Her radio crackled faintly in the silence. She snatched it up, pressing the button. "Merrick, report." Static, then his voice tight, urgent. "We've got Griffin. Safe. But you've got movement on your side. Satellite shows multiple heat signatures pulling back. Corba's regrouping." Wren closed her eyes, relief washing through her like water on fire. Griffin was safe, at least for now. "I engaged. They'll come again," she said flatly. "You're injured. Functional. You can't do this alone." I have no choice. There was a pause. Merrick's tone softened. You always think that, but you're not alone anymore, Wren. Let us help. She let the silence linger, her throat tightening. The ghosts pressed closer again. Karachi, the night she had begged for help that never came. The night she had been left with nothing but her own hands and the will to survive. Her voice was quiet when she answered. Help comes too late. She clicked the radio off. For a long time she sat in the wreckage, listening to the night breathe outside. Every sound was sharper now, every shadow heavier. She would face him again soon, and this time there would be no retreat. Griffin sat on a narrow cot at Sanctuary, staring at the ceiling. The safe house here wasn't a cabin in the woods. It was underground, concrete walls lined with monitors, reinforced doors, military efficiency in every corner. But it felt colder than any place he had ever been. Colonel Merrick had given him water, a blanket, even a clumsy pat on the shoulder. But none of it mattered, because all Griffin could think about was his mother, alone, fighting in the dark, bleeding. He clenched his fists. The whispers from school didn't matter anymore. The video didn't matter. All that mattered was her. He had thought she was just mom, just boring, ordinary, quiet. He had wanted something to be proud of, something to brag about. And now he almost wished he didn't know, because knowing came with fear, with weight, with the gnawing realization that she might not come back. He remembered her laugh when he asked if she'd used Navy SEAL tricks to teach him how to ride a bike. He remembered her steady hands fixing his collar before school. He remembered the way she'd said, "True strength doesn't announce itself. It simply is." She wasn't supposed to be in danger anymore. She wasn't supposed to bleed for the world again. He whispered into the silence, almost a prayer, "Come back, Mom, please." Back at the cabin, Wren paced the broken floor. Pain burned in her arm, but the deeper wound was inside. She had fought hard, but not hard enough. Corba was still out there, and he had seen the crack in her armor, the one word that had turned her steady rhythm into rage. Son. That was the key. He would use Griffin against her until the end, unless she ended him first. She reloaded her weapons, set new traps, reinforced what walls were left. She moved like a machine, but her mind spiraled back to Karachi again and again. The marketplace, the gunfire, her team's voices in her ear. Move left, Hargrove, covering fire, then silence. One by one, cut down. She had dragged herself through the blood and dust, still fighting, still moving, because stopping meant dying. She had promised herself she would never let that happen again. But the ghosts had followed her home. A noise outside snapped her back, a twig soft, deliberate. She aimed at the window, muscles tight. The forest answered with silence. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass. Hollow eyes, scar across her temple, blood drying against her arm. Not just Mom, not just Commander, something caught in between. She whispered to herself, voice barely audible, "You're both, and you can't fail either one." The night stretched on, hours ticked, every second heavier than the last. She knew the fight wasn't finished. Corba would come again, he would come harder. And this time it wouldn't just be men with rifles. It would be him, face to face, until only one of them walked away. She tightened the bandage on her arm, winced, and steadied herself. "Let him come," she whispered. At Sanctuary, Griffin couldn't sleep. Every creak of the reinforced door made his chest tighten. Every voice in the hallway sent his imagination spiraling. He pictured his mother in the cabin, alone against the dark, and the fear twisted inside him until it was almost unbearable. He thought of asking Merrick for updates again, but every time he saw the older man's face, he knew the truth before it was spoken. Merrick was worried too. So Griffin sat on his cot, clutching the small watch his grandfather had given him, whispering into the silence, "Please don't leave me." And in the woods, Wren whispered the same. Not to him, to herself, to the ghosts, to the silence that waited between every breath. "I won't leave him." Her voice was steady, a vow. The night would break soon, dawn would come, and with it the final reckoning. She tightened her grip on the pistol, stared into the trees, and waited for the man who had haunted her for 12 years. She was done running. Why did the dawn feel so heavy? Wren sat against the broken wall of the cabin, watching the first pale light spill through the trees. Her body ached from every angle. Her arm throbbed under the tight bandage. Her throat was raw from smoke and strain. But it wasn't the wounds that weighed her down. It was the waiting. The night had been long, stretched taut with silence. No more attacks, no more voices in the dark, just the forest breathing as if it knew something inevitable was coming. And she did too. She checked her pistol again, chambered around with practiced care. The knife was cleaned, resheathed. Her hands trembled as she moved, but not from fear, from fatigue, from the cost of 12 years running and one night refusing to run anymore. Her mind drifted against her will back to Griffin, his face when she left him, his voice, "Promise me you'll come back." That promise lived in her chest, heavier than any bullet. A branch cracked outside. Her head snapped toward the sound. Her body reacted before her thoughts caught up. She rose, weapon raised, scanning the tree line. The forest gave her answer. Shadows, movement, 3, maybe 4, not probing now, advancing, calm. And in the center, him. Corba. He stepped into the light, shoulder bandaged from her knife, but his stance as arrogant as ever. His men flanked wide, rifles trained on the cabin, but their eyes never left him. He was the center, always had been. Wren's breath steadied. Her finger rested on the trigger, but she didn't fire. Not yet. "You're awake early," Corba called, his voice carrying easy through the still air. "You always were disciplined. Even after all these years, I can still read you." Wren's jaw tightened. She said nothing. He smirked at her silence, stepping closer, boots crunching in the dew-soaked grass. "You could have disappeared forever, but you slipped. One video, one little spark of pride, and here we are." She steadied her aim. "This ends today." Corba chuckled low. "Yes, but not how you think." He raised a hand, his men froze, the rifles lowered slightly, not gone, just waiting. He wanted this personal, like Karachi, like before. "You know why you survived that day," he said, voice tightening, eyes locked on hers. "Because I let you. I wanted you to live with it. I wanted you to carry the weight of watching everyone you loved die while you crawled away. That was my gift to you." The scar on her temple pulsed, memory rushing in her team's voices cutting out, the dust, the blood, crawling alone through chaos, his eyes watching from the smoke. Her voice cracked when she spoke, but it was steady. "You mistake survival for permission. That's why you never beat me." Something flickered in his gaze. A crack, but only for a second, then it hardened again. He drew his pistol, slow, deliberate, leveling it at her chest. His men tensed but didn't move. "This time," he said softly, "you won't crawl away." Wren exhaled once, her mind going quiet. She thought of Griffin, the small weight of his hand in hers, his laugh, his stubbornness, his pride. She thought of him waiting at sanctuary, whispering into the dark for her to come back. She raised her weapon. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The first shot cracked the dawn. Her shoulder jerked, fire blooming hot as a bullet tore through flesh. She staggered but didn't fall. Her aim held. She returned fire, sharp, controlled. The bullet caught his thigh. He cursed, stumbling sideways, but didn't drop. Gunfire erupted then. His men opened fire on the cabin, wood splintering, glass shattering. Wren dove behind the counter, rolled, came up firing. One man dropped, another cried out. The world blurred into smoke and recoil. She moved through the wreckage like a ghost, low, fast, precise. Every shot counted. Every step driven by the same vow, come back to him. Corba's voice roared through the chaos. "You think you're fighting for him. You're condemning him. When I kill you, he'll carry your ghost forever, like you carried Karachi." His words cut sharper than bullets, but she forced them out, refused to let them in. Her silence became its own defiance. She reloaded fast, slipped through the back door, circled wide. The forest welcomed her with cover. She moved until she had angle, until she saw him limping near the tree line, pistol sweeping the shadows. Her breath slowed, her finger tightened. One clean shot ended. But something in her froze. His men were still out there. If she took him now, the rest would swarm her. She had to draw him closer, alone. She stepped into the clearing. His eyes snapped to hers. Blood stained his thigh, sweat dripping down his scarred face. For the first time, he looked less like a predator and more like a cornered man. "This doesn't end with you," he growled. "I'll find him. I'll make sure he remembers me." Her voice was low. "You'll never touch him." They stood there, locked in silence, pistols raised, breath ragged. Then they fired at the same time. His shot grazed her ribs, tearing fabric and flesh. Her shot slammed into his chest. He staggered, dropped to his knees, eyes wide in disbelief. He tried to raise his weapon again, but his arm shook. His strength faltered. He gasped, blood bubbling in his throat. Wren approached slowly, each step heavy. She kicked his weapon away, stood over him, her pistol steady at his head. He laughed, then weak, broken, but still mocking. "You can't kill me. You'll see me every time you close your eyes, just like Karachi." She looked down at him, her breath steady, her hand trembling only slightly. "You're right," she whispered. "I'll see you, but Griffin won't." She lowered the pistol, not to mercy, but to truth. She fired once more, clean, ending it. The forest fell silent again. She stood there, chest heaving, weapon lowered, staring at the body. 12 years of ghosts ended in a single breath. Not victory, not triumph, just an ending. Her knees buckled and she sank to the ground, clutching her ribs. The forest tilted, blurred. But through the pain, one thought burned steady: Griffin. She whispered his name like a prayer. Hours later, Sanctuary's reinforced door swung open. Griffin looked up from the cot, eyes red from sleeplessness. Colonel Merrick entered first, then paused. Behind him, her. Wren's arm was bandaged, her ribs wrapped, her face pale with exhaustion. But she stood. She walked in, step by step, until her eyes found Griffin. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he ran to her, colliding into her chest, his arms wrapping tight. She winced at the pain, but held him tighter, burying her face in his hair. "You came back," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I promised," she murmured. They stayed there, unmoving, until the weight of the world eased enough to breathe. That night, long after Griffin slept beside her in the safety of Sanctuary, Wren sat awake in the dim light, staring at her scar in the reflection of a steel panel. Karachi would never leave her. Korba would always haunt the edges of her memory, but she had chosen not to let those ghosts define her anymore. Strength, she realized, wasn't in the fight. It was in the return, in keeping a promise, in refusing to let the past write the ending. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And tonight it had.